There in the frame is my hero James Jamison, who basically was my main influence in all my years of playing. In 1986, my friend John Watson came around to my house and brought a video of James, the only video that he ever made of a live concert, and I finally found out how he did it, all with his index finger. So from there on I became a complete disciple, in the sense I had the heaviest bass strings, the labella flat wounds, and a really high action, because I realised that you were not going to get that James Jamison sound unless you work extremely hard with the action and the sound, digging into the track. So basically that is my whole life expedition as far as bass playing goes. James Jamison is my guru. And you know what? You can go on YouTube and see all the James Jamison copyists. There's not one in the whole world that does that. Not one. You won't find one, because I'll tell you why I do it is because I spent so many years at it, and after a while, when you keep at something, things fall into place.
What's this, Harry?
D-tuner.
Down a step?
Yeah. Yep.
Ah.
It's actually 2 steps.
Oh, 2 steps.
This is it. But this is a rare bass in the sense that it's the one that Sting, white one that Sting used on Synchronicity Tour.
All right.
Here's a bit of funky stuff. Leave it the other one, I think. Yeah, that funky bit is fine.
I'm here with Harry Brus. I met Harry back in 2011 at the John Coots Memorial Concert at St Mary's RSL. I filmed and photographed the whole event, and as each band finished I went backstage and took photos, and I took a photo of Kevin Borich, Harry and Paul Wheeler, and I just mentioned to Harry, I wouldn't mind filming you again, Harry, and Harry said, I'll let you know when I'm playing. I ended up filming Harry over 19 times in the last 15 years, and I'm just going to ask Harry about his life in music. So Harry, what have you been doing the last 5 years?
Well, the last 5 years have been taken up with some great artists, which is Jesse Redwing is my blues man that I can sort of get really serious about old blues, because it's not like a rehash, it's some deep grooves and some wonderful original blues songs that Jesse has written. Also lately a fellow called Mitchell Anderson, who is basically my best mate now. We've been playing together for about 33 years or something, and we seem to have a connection that is extremely hard to find with musicians, in the sense we're on the same wavelength funk-wise. You know, we have he's a very rare keyboard player, in the sense he's not busy. He just sinks in very simple, super funky grooves, which suits a bass player down to the ground. And also he has a voice to die for. Incredibly soulful, like the great Teddy Pendergrass and so many other great soul artists. So I'm very fortunate to be fronting with a man as soulful as Mitch. And after that, I've been working with Owen Campbell and Pat Powell, Danny Tsun, you think Matt Ross, and most of the gigs I play now with a young guitar player called Ewan Lund, who is definitely the greatest young guitar player to come along in the last 20, 30 years. He's just a natural who exudes feel and emotion. And he's also very, very good at performing, in the sense he's not self-conscious. He's just himself and throws himself out there, which is pretty rare with guitar players, because they're usually a very quiet bunch, believe it or not. And apart from that, just sessions in the studio here, just playing bass for a bunch of people who give me a call, and always happy. Still doing 2-3 gigs a week, which is amazing, in the sense I thought I'd be pensioned off many years ago.
And have you got a new album coming out, or?
Working on that, yeah. But this time I think I want to make it super funky. So I'm working on including some of my favourite people, Pat Powell, Ewan Lund, Milena Barrett, and get something really great going.
Harry, I'd just like to talk now about the musicians in the 60s that you were involved with. So Dinah Lee, how did she come into the picture?
Well, Dinah was basically very close with Max Merritt, so I never actually got to work with her in the 60s, but I found out what a joy she was to work with around 2002 with Long Way to the Top, and we became very good friends. So I'm a big fan of Dinah. And back then, Max Merritt was the number one soul man in Australia. His band was incredible, and we were young guys watching these seasoned professionals doing it in a world-class way. So, and Max's soulful voice always sold it for me. And Yuck Harrison, bass player with Billy Christian, all these great bass players that Max used, he was smart enough to use the best. So basically around 1973, I was with Renee Gayer for about a couple of years, and we had a residency at the Rocks Push, and one night we're playing away, and I turned around, there's Leon Russell on the piano. He walked straight in the front door and got on the piano and jammed with us, and we really just didn't know what the hell was going on, but we lapped it up, which was fantastic. That was the same night that Olivia Newton-John was sitting there in the audience, so it would have been a buzz for her too. So all these events happened a lot back in the 70s. There was a lot of get-together from whoever was visiting from overseas would get involved with the local bands and just become part of the scene as they were at the time.
And what about Normie Rowe?
Normie, I basically supported Normie at the Trocadero in 1967. And I think he just came back from England, and he looked pretty sharp back then, very, very mod. And we thought, oh wow, he's stopped his pop career and he's getting much more into singing more soulful songs, which sounded fantastic. So, and he's a really nice fella, and I managed to work in a band with him, which included Jack Thompson, the actor, Kevin Borich, and all these amazing musicians, Nick O'Shea, and it was Steve Balby, all these guys involved in the band. So it was a fantastic chance to hook up with all these fantastic musos.
And I was mentioning Denny Burgess, our Master's Apprentice. How did you meet him?
Well, Denny and Colin used to be poker partners of mine for a little while back in 1970, and it was great to just hang out with a bunch of guys the same as us, musos, and play a bit of poker and talk about how we're going to make it big time in the world, which was always paramount in our minds at the time. When you're a young fella, you think, this is going to be easy. But after a few years, you realise there's a lot more to it. And so many people drop by the wayside. They have a couple of good years and they're gone, because to keep the momentum going in a music career is unbelievable. You have to sort of have the enthusiasm of basically an unbridled enthusiasm.
And also Billy Thorpe, he's another musician that you were involved with.
Yeah, well, I managed to support Billy Thorpe at Surf City in 1965 a few times, and to us young teenagers, we thought he was incredible, which he was. He danced, he sang up a storm, his band was pretty tough. Vince Maloney, all these great musicians, and it was just great to be opening up for them, which is pretty big at the time. Just like how lucky were my band to be at the Battle of the Sounds in 1967. Now, Billy Thorpe was a joy to play with, because it was like jumping on a freight train once you got going, and he used the greatest musicians, Paul DeMarco, Lockie Doley, Di Pritchard, all the great players, and I felt very privileged to be in that company and always enjoyed every gig we did. And I managed to record a couple, which I hoisted on YouTube, just to show how much I enjoyed playing with Billy. It was a wonderful fellow. And then to get asked to be part of the house band on Long Way to the Top was Billy's decision with Chuggy, which was amazing for us guys, because once we did Long Way to the Top, everyone involved in the house band was from then on busy with all the guys that were on that show. So I spent time with Russell Morris, Brian Cadd, Billy, just amazing few years after that, because it was all triggered by that show. And Billy was a joy in the sense that he treated his musicians fantastically, and there was no rock star trip with Billy. He was totally down to earth. And so I treasure those days with Billy, because, to be a part of an artist who you looked up to when you were 17, and to actually finally work with the king, which Billy was an amazing feeling.
And what about Wendy Stapleton that you knew?
I never really knew Wendy that well.
No?
No, I didn't know Wendy.
Did you ever play on when she was playing?
No. It was a total Melbourne thing.
And what was
Wendy.
she like? I heard of her, but I don't really know much about her.
I don't know her at all.
Oh, okay.
I really don't know her at all. So,
Okay.
but from all her interviews I've seen, she's very good at getting people to talk.
And Doug Parkinson, you knew Doug pretty well.
Doug was, along with Renee Gayer, was my second greatest soul singer that I enjoyed working with, in the sense that I first did my first run with Doug was 1972 with Red McKelvey and the Third Union Band in Brisbane, which was an amazing experience, because then I realised how incredible Doug was. I had played with him on GDK with Kevin Borich for a few clips, but not actually did a whole week with him, which was, wow, what a powerhouse. That voice was bigger than the band. And so we spent a week there up at one of the great hotels up there, and from then on, sporadically started working with Doug, especially around after 2000 with Long Way to the Top. I did a few gigs, and it was always incredible, especially the Beatles show that we used to do at the Opera House. It was incredible to hear him sing Dear Prudence stronger than he did in the 60s. Every night he just tore the house down.
And Marsha Hines? Yeah.
Yeah, I basically was in Hair in 1969, and Marsha arrived from America, and basically we became friends and enjoyed our amazing Hair experience, which was incredible, that band, in the sense that Marsha was there out the front in the show, but the band was also part of the show in the sense they weren't in any pit, they were on top of the artists on stage, so everything they did basically was seen by the audience, and there was a lot of shenanigans going on behind the artists performing, so I think they had a few laughs there, because musicians, you just can't hold them down from being naughty.
I went there with my mum.
Really?
Yeah, we went there.
Well, you know, it suited me down to the ground, in the sense the style of the grooves from Hair, Boogaloo, I mean, that's James Jamison, all those sort of songs, the grooves were all ripped off soul grooves, so I mean, I was in heaven. And I've got to tell you the story of how I got the gig. The bass player, Reno, dropped some LSD before the show and walked off the scaffolding and broke his arm. And so I got the call from Patrick Flynn the next day saying, can you come in and check out the show and see if you want to do it, and we'd love you to be part of the band. So I went in, and they said to me, well, sorry to put this on you, but you have to play it tonight. And I went, oh yeah, no worries. I think you think you're bulletproof when you're young, because I just put all the sheet music, which was basically court charts, and just put it all over the place, and no worries, I managed to do that first night pretty good. So from then on, I was there, part of Hair, for a while. And basically another great gig I had was earlier on, I'd be at Checkers night, afterwards I went to Checkers nightclub for the late session, and managed to jam with Billy Preston for a whole week, because he was on a B3, and we just couldn't believe we're playing away in the late shift. Instead of Billy going home to his hotel room, he'd rather play with us. So it was amazing. I'll never forget that. He was a wonderful, friendly guy. And so they're my early Hair days, and they were hair raising.
Another show I went with my mum was that Marshall's Jesus Christ Superstar.
Yeah, well, that really sent her in the stratosphere in Australia, didn't it?
Yeah.
I was part of her band in 1979, and did a ton of shows, and that's when my son Jimmy was born. I was in Surfers Paradise playing with Marsha when he was born at Royal North Shore Hospital, so I missed out on that one. Music can sometimes stop you from family events.
And Ross Wilson, you've known him for a while?
Yeah, well, Ross flew me down to Melbourne to join his new band, Mighty Kong. And it was a very crazy experience, in the sense that we could not find a drummer. It was just Ross Hannaford, Ross Wilson and me trying to find a drummer. And all we did every day was try out a drummer. And we had like 40 drummers at least. And it just could not settle on one, because they just didn't feel right. But there were some great guys that sort of tried out, but it just didn't work. So eventually I got an offer from Renee Gayer in Sydney, so I flew back to Sydney to join that band. And then Tim Partridge, my best mate back then joined Mighty Kong, so it worked out pretty good for him. So Ross and I have a history from a long time ago, and I started working in his outfit back in the, I think in the early 2000s. We did Live at the Basement, which is one of my favourite musical experiences because we all played really well. And Ross is the most professional musician you've ever met, in the sense he's always on his game. He's a lot like Russell Morris, and Russell actually told me that Ross is his favourite Australian vocalist, so gives you an idea here. They're both amazing singers. So I sort of catch up with Ross whenever I can. Last time was at the Renee Gayer tribute, and it's always great to see someone who's been through the mill like me. You know, we're a couple of survivors, and it's so great that we keep doing it. I think we're a bit of an example to the younger guys that, yes, you can be that old and still rock on.
So with Renee, the story that you flew back up to Sydney, and then tell us about that whole story, Harry, because you were really close to Renee, weren't you?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I tell you, the amazing story is when I joined Renee, I was actually a bit of a name, in the sense I'd had a #1 hit with Jeff St. John, Teach Me How to Fly. And back then, when you had a #1 hit, everyone knew who you were. Whereas these days, you have a hit and you're gone in 6 months and no one remembers who it was or anything. But back then, because of Teach Me How to Fly and Copperwine, I had a sort of reputation. And Renee's band, Mother Earth, thought, you know, they weren't happy with their bass player. He was not that great. And they thought, oh, well, let's give this fella a ring, see if he's interested. And I immediately jumped at it because I remembered Renee with Sun doing an audition for Jonathan's in the afternoon, no audience or anything, and just thought, wow, who is this? And then when she asked me, I realised who it was and joined that band. It was probably my first, apart from being with Jeff Oakes and the Reprieve in the late 60s, it was probably my most powerful soul experience, because Renee was just on fire every night. And we had lines down the street at the Rocks Push, because when we were the band around town in 1973, and we had so many incredible gigs coming out with Jim Kelly, Mark Punch, Russell Dunlop in that band. So it was, you see a lot of it on YouTube in black and white from GDK, and you get an idea that we were pretty much ahead of our time, and we never quite emulated that in the later years, in the sense we all went our rock ways and all the different things. But with Renee, Mother Earth, it was soul music.
Were you on any of the shows like Sounds or Night Moves, Harry?
GDK, I was on Saturday Date with Dave Millicent, and let me think, I was on Don Lane's show with Tony Gahar and the End People, Janice Slater, and that was 1968, I think. Pretty incredible experience being on the Don Lane show back then. And I did it later with Renee on the Don Lane show, and we did a couple of spots. So through the years, luckily enough, I kept some of the clips, and just about all the clips you see on YouTube are stuff I've had in my suitcase that I pulled out when YouTube started happening. I thought, oh, thank God I saved these, because they're the only ones, I'm the only guy that did save them. Otherwise they never would have been on there and captured Renee in full flight.
Yeah, because what they used to do is record the next night.
Exactly,
so
record
they would
over.
show the show, and then
I just wish that when we performed Teach Me How to Fly on Bandstand, they'd kept that, because that would have been a great clip. So disappointed when Jeff, back about 4 or 5 years later, did a TV show with a bunch of guys miming us, and they didn't take any time in learning what we were playing. So here they are fumbling around, especially with the greatest guitar solo in Australian history. Ross East would teach me how to fly. None of the guys actually took time to bass solo. The bass player just fumbled around, whereas I think doing that, they should have just tried to mimic the actual record a bit, which is disappointing. So that is the clip that everyone sees on YouTube, which is not us.
Oh, no. And what about Brian Cadd? Because Brian, because he's American-based, wasn't he, for a while?
Yeah, I mean, Brian's such an authentic American roots artist. When you think of his style and the sound of his voice, you'd think he would have come from Arkansas.
Yeah, that's a great song.
Yeah, but one of the, just like Russell, one of the guys that is unbelievably fun to work with, in the sense it's just laughs non-stop. He's actually a very great comedian. Keeps the band always laughing. And also his songs, his original songs like Ginger Man, were a joy to play because they were really, really great songs. Don't you know it's magic, and all these fantastic songs.
Because he played in Axiom, didn't he?
Yeah, with
Had a Little River Band.
that's Glenn Shorrock, wasn't it? Yeah.
And did you know Glenn well too?
I know him well enough as working with a fair few times, because his honey voice, just beautiful. Some people just have the sound, and Glenn was one of those people who has the sound of a unique voice.
And when did Little River Band start? Was that about 78 or a bit earlier?
That was 78. And unfortunately, it was a shame that they folded, because I still feel they had a few good albums in them. But they all went on to do their own thing.
And what about Tommy Emmanuel?
Well, Tommy, wow, what a buzz hanging out with him back in the late 70s. I remember doing a fantastic disco album with Tommy playing his Telecaster and funky rhythms coming left, right and centre. And he was basically at the Texas Tavern in those days, and used to run into him a fair bit. But it wasn't long before he took off with Doug Parkinson and Southern Star Band, and everyone realised, wow, this guy is amazing. But amazing when you think he was discovered basically on electric guitar. His acoustic prowess happened after that, and then the world saw what was going on. He's now the man.
And his brother Phil too,
Oh, Phil.
together.
Man.
What was the band that they played in together?
Gold Rush.
Gold Rush, yeah. I
But
saw them a couple of
I'm
times.
telling you, Phil, incredible fun. And I've been so fortunate to work with funny musicians, and Phil was just dared not take anything seriously. I still remember when when he heard my ringtone on my phone, which was the beginning of Wonderful Land, The Shadows, he immediately grabbed it off me, and that was his ringtone forever, which is the beginning of that. When you hear it, you think of Phil. But we had so many incredible gigs. I remember one night at the Caloundra RSL where he wasn't happy with his on-stage sound, so he actually went to the four-way and turned the left side exactly around to him, the PA. Can you imagine the sound guy was tearing his hair out? I could tell you a million. I'll tell you, I took him to the #1 Lebanese restaurant here, the Fatima, and he said, when he ordered his falafel, he said, and don't put any of that grass on it. Tabbouleh.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've got a million Phil stories, and they're all fantastic. I love Phil, and it was one of the saddest days when he passed, and I still think he would have been around now if it wasn't a few things that happened.
Yeah, I filmed him at the Factory Theatre just before he passed. It was a good show there. It was sad, yeah.
Wow, and both the brothers, so much passion. We have they're just icons in Australian music.
He played with Mal Eastick. Have you ever played with Mal Eastick?
Yeah, I have played with Mal a few times, and that's when I found out the golden tone of Mal. He gets a tone that no one gets, and that's why it's always timeless. It's just beautiful, and Mal plays with a beautiful style. And I remember hanging out back in the mid-70s and seeing Mal, and he was always playing fantastic.
Yeah, I met him playing with Melina Barrett.
Yeah.
She's such a great singer too.
Well, I figure she's my favourite Australian blues singer.
Yeah.
She's just fantastic, just so good. So, and there's a lot of good blues singers, but for me, she's the one. She's the number one.
And then the story you told me a couple of years ago about Joe Walsh.
And that,
Was that when you were out in America or something?
no, I wasn't in America, no, but we did a gig with Joe Walsh and Mick Skelton and Kevin Borich, and wow, what a buzz. It was just after he'd stopped drinking, I think, because when we had our rehearsal, he didn't say boo to the band.
Mm-hmm.
It was just, we'd learnt the stuff. And seriously, when I listen to it back now, I've still got recording of it. We played fantastic. Because it was Joe Walsh, we really got down and learnt the stuff properly, really well. And I used the bass with the heavy flat wounds to get that old 60s, 70s bass sound. So I was so over the moon hearing back on it.
The American musicians have got, they're all so talented, aren't they?
Well, they're going through the roof now. When you see them, their dexterity, and you'd think that, are we scared like over here seeing that incredible virtuosity? But I think it's the opposite. We get more enthusiastic when we see talent that good. And, we all have, no matter what level musicians we're at, we all have something that we're good at. I found what I'm good at, so I'm never threatened by that, because there's a certain thing I do that's mine. So if you find that thing that's just you, well, the rest doesn't matter.
I think the story was it about Ronnie Wood or Keith Richards you told me about?
Oh, well, when Kevin Borich and I were in New York, second night we arrived, we got a phone call at Renee's apartment saying, Ronnie Wood wants you to come down and hang out. So we arrived at Ronnie's place, and he what an amazing, friendly guy he was, because he'd never met me before, but a couple of hours after arriving, he had his arm around me. I was his best mate. So then we went downstairs and jammed some Rolling Stone songs, believe it or not, with Kevin Borich on guitar, Renee singing, me on bass, and Ronnie on his Ludwig drums. His downstairs studio in his terrace was incredible, because it had Hammond, Leslie's, all the Les Pauls, all the guitars, all the paintings over the wall. What a studio. And we thought, wow, look, it's all here, just like a music store. And he treated us to some amazing video footage that we'd never seen before. So Ronnie is a top bloke.
And Barry Leaf, you've known him for a long time, I guess.
One of my closest music associations, that's for sure. There's maybe 2 or 3 gigs in my life that changed everything, and Barry's gig at the Musicians Club in 1979 was like heaven on earth, because we had 3 nights, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, just going through the roof there. And Friday, Saturday, there were lines down the street, and here we are just playing the best soul, funk music, and the dancers would be on the dance floor within 30 seconds of us starting our set. The packed immediately. So Barry is one of those incredible performers who not just a great singer, a communicator who can just talk to an audience and sweet talk them in a very relaxed way. So it relaxes the band as well. So we had Rex Bullen, Rex Go, we had so many fantastic, Steve Housden, Sunil De Silva playing drums, and I guess people know Sunil De Silva as a percussionist, but as a drummer, he was fantastic because it was all meat and potatoes funk. Not busy, just soulful grooves. So I'm a big fan of his drumming. And we'd have musicians coming in from overseas and jamming with us. And Denny Davis, incredible drummer with Stevie Wonder, and just getting up on stage and playing our set as if they knew it backwards, because they actually were some of the guys that were on the records that played on the songs that we were playing live, so they had a pretty good idea of what was going on. We had guys from Chicago band and horn players and percussionists from James Brown's band. It was a never-ending roll call of great musicians coming in to jam with us. So that was seriously something I'll never forget and always grateful for. So Barry's still ruling the vocal scene in Sydney because he's just gets better and better.
And he's with Peter Northcote, which is...
And Peter Northcote, I mean...
The pair of them are just...
Peter Northcote was part of the Musicians Club as well, and even then he was already seriously playing some amazing stuff, and now he's just incredible when you watch him because it's so effortless, and he's one of those guys that just gets in that zone and just plays faultlessly. You hardly ever hear him make a bad note, so I'm a big fan of Peter Northcote, so I have so much respect for him.
And what about Leo Sayo? Because Leo toured here a lot because he had a lot of hits here, didn't he?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you how we got that gig. I got a phone call from Steve White. Hey, Leo Sayo wants to put a band together and he wants you to be involved. And the reason was that Leo came to a live at the Basement with Renee Geyer as just a punter. And I didn't even know he was there, I think. But he saw that band and said, asked Stephen White, the Lee Koenigen's manager, how about asking these guys if they're willing to do it? Because Renee had actually stopped sort of using that band. So from then on, we became Leo's band. And I think even to this day, it was probably the classiest band I've ever been in, because Leo was incredibly smart and paid for 3 weeks of 5 days a week rehearsals. So when we went out, we were finely tuned and really knew all the songs. He was incredibly professional. We got big books of the words of the songs, so we had an idea what it was all about. And Paul Burton, Mark Kennedy, and Alan Mansfield and Sharon O'Neill, incredible band. When I listen back to it, it's one of my proudest moments at how I played with Leo, because I really harnessed a very clean, no-nonsense bass to his songs, which I'm always very proud of.
Now, I was going to ask you just before you mentioned the Basement, it's about to be closed. The new owners are closing it.
Yeah, Mary's Underground.
Yeah.
Well, I remember going down there, my first gig at Mary's Underground, after it opened. I could not believe it was just so ordinary, like any place that you go to in Sydney. Nothing at all going. They'd put the stage to the side as a second thought now. Whereas with the Basement, the stage was the centrepiece.
Yeah.
And it was all over. I played down there, and the enthusiasm from the audience was minimal. It just didn't have a vibe. So I think they squandered the history of the Basement. And you know, there's a few people talking at the moment about finding a way of resurrecting that room, because when you think of the amount of world-class musicians that played there, Joe Zawinul, Prince, it's scary how much music history was in the Basement. So I'm so glad to be part of that.
Because I did you and Mitchell there. That was a good gig. Not long. I
Yeah.
think that might have been when it reopened.
Yeah.
When they shut it for a little while, and then
Yeah, well, I can't remember it closing down, but I remember that. But
that was
we had some just amazing gigs down there. Like Renee ruled the basement. We were there all the time, and I would come out after a Renee show, and people wouldn't know that I was playing bass in the band, and they were like, "Wow, wasn't that amazing?" Looking up, saying, "Wow," because people were actually moved by Renee. She had that soulful attack.
And what about Jimmy Barnes? Because Jimmy's been with everybody, hasn't he?
Well, I only worked with Jimmy a few times, but another incredible experience. I think Jimmy Barnes is one of Australia's supermen. I cannot believe the level of performance that he gives, the powerful. It's just incredible. I think he's superhuman. He's a bit like Paul McCartney. I think there's not too many of those guys around that can do that. Just perform year after year with that sort of intensity. So incredible respect for Jimmy, and he treated us really great. We did a bit of recording with him, and so it was just fantastic. One of those great experiences, just like Ozzy Crawl was a great experience.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. So you did the last 2 albums.
Yeah, it was that was just fantastic because they were actually a really great bunch of guys who didn't take them too seriously. They were having fun. The only one that was serious about it was James, because after a gig he'd be in his room writing, and you could hear him strumming away on his guitar. So he was more serious than anyone at the time.
And how did you come to be on those last 2 albums?
Well, I tell you, I got to tell you the story. It's one of those rock and roll stories that my friend John Watson rings me up and says, "Harry, I'm down here with Ozzy Crawl, and there's this track, this swinging sort of shuffle type track that we just can't get a groove in." And I played him. The demo we did was a rap demo of a track I put together, and they said, "Oh yeah, that sounds cool." So they flew me down for this swinging track, and so I did that, and they went, "Hey, that's it. Yeah. Well, while you're there, there's another one here that's not quite making it." So I did that anyway. Flew back to Sydney. Get a call on the Sunday. "Hey, we want you to come back and play a couple more tracks." So this happened about 2 or 3 times. In the end, there was one track left. They said, "Well, this sounds great. It's the only track we're happy with, but we're going to go out to the Japanese restaurant and you have a go at see what you can do." So they left me in Armstrong Studios, big studios in Melbourne, on my own, no engineer, pressing record. So I thought, this is my chance. So I lit up a big joint because it was a Jamaican track. It was a bit of reggae. So I lit up a big joint and put it down, pressed record. Did it. They came back from the Japanese restaurant, had a listen, and said, "Well, that's it." So I played on all the tracks. So I knew I was sitting pretty, because what are they going to do? You know, I went back to Sydney not thinking much, and then they asked me to join, which was a sad day for Paul Williams, the bass player, because he was at. I have this feeling now that if they hadn't have gotten me and stuck to their style that they had through the years, their bass player Paul would have been fine, because he suited that style of music. But I have a feeling that James was ready to move on, and I still think that album I did was his first solo album, because it was a departure. It was a lot more eclectic than Ozzy Crawl was. So he had a lot more in the game than they did. So, and one of the greatest experiences was hanging out with Brad Robinson, the guitar player, keyboard player, because he was just so much fun and such a wonderful guy. Yeah, and Simon Binks on guitar, lovely fella, real lot of fun, and the grief that they gave Simon Binks in a good way, he handled it so well, but they really used him as a punching bag. but he handled it very well and gave back as good as they gave. So I mean, so many great stories of touring with them, because we were, from here I am in Sydney playing in pubs, going to where there's 3,000-4,000 at every show, and we didn't stop touring for about a year. It was incredible. So I learnt what it was like to be part of a successful band, which was an eye-opening experience.
So with Kevin Burridge, I did you with Kevin a lot. I actually, in '79, I brought a Marshall amp that was ordered by Kevin when he was with the La-Di-Das, but when it came over, he wasn't gigging a lot and he couldn't afford it. So I brought it off the person that he sold
Wow.
it to. And
Yeah.
how did, like, Kevin was, well, he's back in the 60s too. Did you know him in the 60s?
Well,
or
you
just
know,
of him?
how is this? He arrived with the La-Di-Das in Sydney, and first gig off the boat was Ward Austin's Jungle in York Street, I think it was. And guess who was the support band? Me, on Kevin's first gig. And I tell you what, we literally shit ourselves. They were just miles ahead of anything in Sydney. They were polished, vocals incredible, playing incredible. It sort of taught us a lot. We saw the future of Australian music, basically, because they were way ahead of their time here. And I think everyone that saw them at the time, Sydney Musos, would have been blown out. So, and here we have La-Di-Das and Max Merritt and the Meteors, both New Zealand exports, taking over Australia. So New Zealand,
They've done that a lot.
and New Zealand have a lot to answer for,
They split ends.
putting a lot of Aussie musos out of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so much talent. Look at Barry Leaf; he's infiltrated big time.
So you met Kevin there. How long after that did you end up joining the band? Like, did he ask you? Oh, of course he asked you.
yeah. We did a few things together, and finally, around 1974, after the La-Di-Das broke up, and so Little Goose, me and Kevin formed the Kevin Burridge Express, and our first gig, I think, was Whyalla, and we drive up to the gig, and the sign said Kevin Burridge, Burridge. We thought, oh well, this is a pretty good start.
That's really in the middle of nowhere. That
Yeah.
Whyalla.
Yeah, well, you know, Kevin Burridge, it's hilarious. But Goose and I got on like a house, because we were rooming. Yeah, Kevin would
And
always
who's
have his room.
Goose? Who's
Little Goose from The Chain,
Oh,
Barry Harvey.
right, sure.
Now, he was the funniest guy you could hang with, and we shared rooms, so I can testify to how hilarious he was. He would break out with this uproarious yelp laugh that you could not believe. It was just broke. Everyone went silent when they heard it. But Goose was something else. He was a jazz drummer playing blues, because you would get these Elvin Jones jazz chops in the middle of a shuffle, you know, which was fantastic, because what it did, he opened up the blues when he played. So, you know, you could do something that fitted in beautifully with that. So I'm a big fan of Little Goose. But my biggest inspiration on the bass at the time was Barry Sullivan, Big Goose, who was the guy with Chain and the biggest session guy playing on a lot of hits. And I remember at the time, Barry Sullivan was the only guy that I could see who had the funk soul thing down. There was nobody else. So I basically was moving that same direction. So I was a big fan and caught every show of Barry's, and we became pretty close in the sense every time I went to Melbourne, he would grab me and we'd have lunch, and he would be so warm. I think he realised that I was a big fan and I was on his wavelength bass-wise. So he's always remembered by me as one of my greatest influences.
So you were with Kevin for, that's before Rene, isn't it?
after Renee.
Oh, you were. Oh, really?
Yeah, so Renee was around 72, 73,
Right.
and Kevin started 74.
And how long did that last for?
I think to 76, but from about 1980, I started working with him all the time through the years, off and on, all the way up to a few years ago. So, with a lot of different drummers. Johnny Annis.
Paul Wheeler. That's to me. That's the best setup. You, Paul Wheeler, and Kevin.
Well, I think it was, I loved the Kevin Borich Express with Johnny Annis, but when Paul joined, he brought a gayer band into the whole thing because he just plays amazing. So to me, that is my favourite Express.
Gave you more room to do anything.
Exactly. Yeah, he you could go for it heaps more because he was so good at opening everything up. So that was my favourite Express.
And then when you got with Mitchell and Paul was in the band too, that show down at Beaches was a really good show where you had the horn player.
That's right, and you filmed that, didn't you?
And the guitarist,
Adam Pringle.
And the other guitarist too.
Yeah, Franco Raggett.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was
incredible!
A great show.
That, and I remember I watched that clip a few weeks ago, and wow, it's so groovy that
I
band.
hope I put it on the hard drive for you.
That's fantastic.
I hope so.
Can't wait to see that.
I hope so.
And it's a few songs or
No, the whole set.
the whole set. Oh,
But I'm
fantastic.
not sure if it's on another hard drive I couldn't find, and I've only just put
No,
one
I'm
song.
looking forward
We'll
to that.
see.
Yeah,
We'll
because we had trumpet then. He was really
Yeah.
good too.
Oh, that was. I told someone that I film Harry a lot, and now and then there's one show and one song, and it was when you did Sexual Healing. That version was the best version of any band I've ever heard in my life. It was.
Yeah, and
that
it was
was a-
very, how we say, classy.
Yeah.
This was
Oh, it was
just lovely.
Had a feeling about it gives you a shiver.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember watching it a while back, and like I said, Mitch is just a very soulful man.
So Harry, over your whole career, what you've said today, and when you look back on your career, like through music and who you played with, are you happy with where you are today after all that? Like, do you wish? Is there any regrets that I never did this, or?
No, you know what? I am extremely grateful for my whole progress through the years because I've noticed it's, people notice that I do film most of the gigs, and probably some of them think, oh, that ego, he wants to see it. When you film yourself, it's the bare basics. It shows you what's going on. You never get an ego because you always want it to be better and better, and so it keeps you in touch of your progress. And the way I'm so grateful with my progress is I have improved all the way through. When I listen to some of my stuff in the 80s and 90s, it's hard to listen to because it doesn't have the depth of what I do now. It just, when you get serious about music in a big way, the depth becomes deeper through your life, and it doesn't wane when you get older. It actually gets deeper.
And when you first started on, because you play guitar as well.
Yeah, I'm a frustrated guitar player, but when I hear young guys like you and Lund play, I feel like not picking it up.
Go back to bass.
Yeah, because but I do my guitar thing, which, believe it or not, this weekend is one of my favourite times. It's the Beatles weekend at Beaches, and I get to play and sing lead guitar on something, George Harrison.
Yeah, I
get
filmed
to
you doing that, yes.
Yeah, and also on While My Guitar Gently Weeps, and I trade licks with Paul Burton and Rex Goet. For a bass player, that is a big buzz, because it's like make or break. Can I pull this off every time? It's scary for me.
I didn't know that was on. I would have filmed that.
Yeah, but it's always I think it's like 15, 16 years it's been going now. All due to Zoltan, Wally Budai, who puts a lot of effort in keeping go. Wally's one of the greatest bass players around, one of Peter Northcott's bass players, favourite bass players. So I'm a big fan of Wally's playing. Every time he plays a song, it means something. So he's one of my favourites.
And Rex, he's such a good guitar
Rex, go. Oh my God. When you got Rex on the gig, it's
Who
just...
did he play with originally to get where he is?
Well, he's basically early hit with Leon Berger at the Musicians Club. Now, my earlier mention of the Musicians Club with Barry Leaf, well, Leon Berger was the opening act, I'd say from 9 till 12, and then Barry took over at midnight. So, I mean, Rex was in the Leon Berger band, and he actually played on some of my demos in 1969. And he is probably like Peter Northcote, so proficient in what he does. When you've got him on a gig, man, you just can't do any better than that. That's it.
And another...
He's also the busiest guy. If you can get Rex, you're a lucky employer, because he's so busy.
Another one I thought, Leon Russell. Did you ever have anything to do with Leon Russell? Or...
Yeah. Well, one night he came to the Rocks Push, and he got on the piano from walking in the front door with Renee. Yeah, so, I mean, that was incredible. Like, you don't expect Leon Russell to come onto your gig uninvited. Just walk on stage, and there was a piano that happened to be there.
And what about festivals? Did you ever do Sunbury? Or
No, I didn't do Sunbury, but one of the most memorable gigs I've done was Wallachia, which was 80,000 people past Penrith there. And wow, every Australian act was on there. And the story on that is incredible in the sense that some crazy reason we were 80,000 people, and we all dropped the strongest acid trip that you could find, which was Orange Wedge. It was the strongest acid available, and the whole band was on it. Before we went on, we dropped it half an hour.
And which band's this?
Jeff St. John and the Copper Wine. I mean, sorry, it was Wendy Saddington and the Copper Wine. And Wendy was on mushrooms. So the whole band was basically tripping out. I remember playing one note and like my feet bounced along the ground because I had 8 quads, Leonard quads on bass. This thunderous bass. And I looked at my Fender Telecaster and realised, hey, I better not touch these machine heads. I was, even though I was so out of it, I knew if I started fiddling with the machine heads, the tone, I'd be all over the place.
You wouldn't know if you're in tune or not.
Exactly. So I thought, hopefully it's in tune from the last gig.
Right.
And so we played our set, and we had a ball. You know, like I remember looking out there and thinking I was at Woodstock. People were melting in front of me.
And who was on the bill?
Thorpe, all the biggest acts in the world.
And Skyhooks, did you ever meet?
I didn't tour much with Skyhooks because I think we were in a different, with Renee and Kevin Boris, it was a different, they had their pop thing and we weren't really pop. We were sort of
Were
more...
they from Queensland or Melbourne? Or?
All Melbourne guys,
Melbourne,
Greg
yeah.
McCain, all those guys.
Yeah.
So they were massive. But anyway, with this acid thing with Wendy Saddington and the Copper Wine, Richard Batchins, who was the top engineer producer on Festival Records, at the end of the gig came up to us and said, "Hey guys, that was fantastic. That's your next album." Here we are, we've dropped this acid and played this gig, and believe it or not, it was #1.
Is that live album?
Yeah,
live.
it came out and it was #1 in Australia, and here's these guys on acid.
I'll
And
have
when
to try and find it.
and when you listen to Wendy Saddington live on YouTube, you can tell it's psychedelic.
She had real big hair, didn't
afro.
she? Yeah.
But you can tell it's psychedelic. The playing, you can tell there's something. You know, when
I'll
these
look it up.
And also, I think the reason we pulled it off, because we were a band, you know, we weren't just thrown together, so we just went with it, and it's a fantastic album.
Is
of
there
blues.
much footage of that?
No footage at all,
At all?
which is a shame, because I would imagine if we had the great... See, Wending...
Is this in the 80s, is it?
Pardon?
In the 80s?
1970.
Oh, 70.
Now, this is...
Oh, wow.
The greatest blues singer Australia ever had was Wendy Saddington. There's no one that ever came close. And Renee was a major fan of Wendy's. They became very close. I think Renee had so much respect for Wendy because Wendy came, vocally wise, from Aretha and Bessie Smith and the blues singers. So, I mean, my career is dotted with working with the greatest vocalist Australia has ever had. So how lucky am I in the sense that I turned down a house, buying a house in 1973 after Renee, when Jeff Oakes basically said, listen, I'm doing this new show, I want you to be part of the house band. And I went to the show in the afternoon to check it out. It was the Rocky Horror Show. And I said to Jeff, oh man, no thanks. Turned it down. I would have been able to buy a house from the proceeds of being in that band back then. But my emphasis was always on soul music and grooves and getting better. And I saw that as a bit of too much of a detour.
So good.
That was at, I think, the Metro or something. It was at Glebe Theatre. And it was there for years. You know, I should have probably hung around for a year and just bought my house and then moved on.
Yeah.
I made a few decisions like that avoided money sometimes, but c'est la vie.
So Harry, we're in 2026. What's your plans for just the near future?
Oh, you know what? I've had a few songs of mine recorded by Renee, and my plans and my hope is always to find that great song writing. And so that's what I'm down here every day just working at it and just keep my nose to the grindstone and keep practicing the bass. Now that I'm 77, I have even more enthusiasm than I ever had, so I have no complaints.
So Harry, it's been great talking to you again. I started this because I wanted people to know about musicians like you, your life, that they don't know about. So thanks for spending this time and last time doing it, and all the times you've let me film you. It's been great.
Well, let me film. We've always wanted you to come and film. Remember, I've rung you a few times. Come on, film this one, because we do appreciate your enthusiasm for documenting some of these great gigs. Because, you know, the musicians get old, but this footage never gets old.
Yeah, no, it's been a pleasure to.
And it was great to always know you, Greg. You've been fantastic all through the years, especially with some of the photography. You know, you've always done the front cover of all my albums.
Oh, yeah, thanks.
You know.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Because it seemed your photos were always the best. You know?
Thanks. Because we did a lot of shows together, the Sydney Blues Festival, when you drove me to Double Bay that night.
Yeah.
Down at beaches.
Yeah, well,
all over the place.
You know, because I recognise your passion for it too. You know, in a way, you're like a musician. You want to get to the next gig.
Not a lot of people are doing